1893, outside this very pub in Oxford, a football club was born. Back then they went by the name of Headington Football Club, and between 1893 and 1911 they would dominate the local leagues, winning pieces of silverware every season up until 1911, where they formed with Headington Quarry to become Headington United. After joining forces in 1911 and becoming Headington United, the club needed to then find a proper ground to play their home games. This is where the manor comes into the story. After a few more promotions in the year 1948, Headington United decided to turn professional, and then just 12 years later they were granted permission to change their name to, as they're now called, Oxford United Football Club. And then 2 years later after that, in the year 1962, Oxford would play their first ever league game, beating Lincoln 2-1 at the Manor Ground.
Be incredible. I mean, especially cup games under the floodlights, and against sort of top league opposition. It was those are the sort of the biggest memories, and then obviously getting to the top flight.
In 1982, the club saw massive change, with publisher Robert Maxwell becoming chairman and appointing Jim Smith as manager. In 1985, a David Langham goal saw Oxford promoted to the top flight for the first time in the club's history, making a 23-year journey from the first game in the Football League to the First Division, a remarkable achievement for a club the size of Oxford. In 1986, Oxford achieved greatness, with the club stepping out of Wembley for the first time in their history, beating Jim Smith's QPR side 3-0 in the League Cup final.
You'll be a winner at Wembley. Well, splendid headgear and a splendid second half performance. Malcolm Shotton with the chairman of Oxford, Robert Maxwell. What a happy, unforgettable day for them. The unbelievable has happened, and a dream has come true. The whole of Oxfordshire is here, and they've got supporters they didn't know they had. With gates of around 9 or 10,000 at the Manor Ground, they've brought something like 35,000 and more here today, and have treated them royally. David Langham, the fullback. Little Les Phillips, a London boy who was a Chelsea fan and finishes up at Oxford. And at the very last, the Rangers manager, Jim Smith, and 72-year-old Ken Fish. What a moment.
Club in turmoil on and off the pitch in 1999, and the introduction of the Taylor Report, it was clear that Oxford United need to move to pastures new. So just 2 years later, in 2001, the Manor saw its last ever game, and now one of the most memorable grounds in English football history is a hospital.
That side, I think the club was on a steep decline. The crowds are plummeting, and it wasn't such a happy place. But generally speaking, certainly through the 80s and some parts of the early 90s, it was a great place to go. And I started going there in the 1969 was my first game, and throughout the early 70s, especially some huge crowds there. I mean, there were 18,000 against Birmingham City, things like that. It was incredible.
You've obviously seen some wonderful players play there across the time. Do you think that the atmosphere helped the players progress as players? I mean, we saw the touching tributes of Joey Beecham not that long ago, and some of the videos and stuff. Like I said, I wasn't lucky enough to ever see him, but you watch the videos of him running down the hill at the Manor. Do you think that the fans, it inspired him to be just as good as he was?
I'm sure that's the case. I mean, like I say, it's running down that slope, which also always you try to kick that way in the second half towards the London Road end, and it frightened a lot of opposing teams. They, especially when we had players like Joey, Chrissy Allen, Paul Simpson, wingers with pace who could get past defenders and whip in a good cross or score goals themselves. It scared opposition players rigid, and it gave the crowd there sort of like basically willing the team down the slope into the London Road. Any of the players who played there will tell you that they made a huge difference.
In 2001, Oxford played their first game here at the Kassam Stadium in front of over 8,000 people. But it wasn't the start to the new chapter that the club wanted, with the first years being that of dread and disappointment and in 2006 a 3-2 loss to Leyton Orient condemned Oxford United to relegation to the conference, what is now the National League.
You mentioned earlier about how towards the end of the time at the Manor, the crowds dropped, the relationship wasn't as good between the fans and the club. Do you think that sort of followed through to the move to the Kassam? Because obviously it's not been the best of relationships between the Kassam and the fans. Do you think that started with the move from the Manor, or do you think that is purely just because of the whole Kassam situation?
Yeah, I've got to be careful what I say, because obviously I'm a club employee, and so what I say. I mean, obviously it's my own personal opinion what I'm saying, but I got to be kind of a bit sort of diplomatic about it all. So I think that I think there was a bit of suspicion about Kassam's motives right from the start. And I was actually a member of the Foul group, the Fighting Rocks United's Life group, that started before Kassam came on board, but welcomed him into the club and fought tooth and nail for the move to Mintry Farm. And we had very good relationships with him then at that stage. I remember getting invited round to sort of like his place at Enstone, and some of the. He treated us really well, gave us a free season ticket for the first season in the ground and everything like that. And I think at that stage, I think by that time people had realised that the move was necessary. I mean, a lot of people sort of like moaning about moving, but it was, I think most people realised it was essential for the club to progress. It had to move. There were obviously rumblings about the state of the stadium when we first moved in there. Not all Kassam's fault. The decision to go with 3 stands was made long before Kassam came on board. And I think he inherited a bit of a mess, to be fair. But it was a difficult time, I think, for a lot of people that time, and it didn't end brilliantly, obviously, either with the if you remember the storming of the boardroom in 2006, that was, I think, and things like that. I mean, it was never a comfortable relationship that Kassam had with the fans.
Despite the club starting their first season in non-league with a 19-game unbeaten run, a club and conference record, they would fall 1 short, agonisingly losing on penalties to Exeter City in the playoff semi-finals. But 3 years later, the club would go 1 better, reaching Wembley again for the playoff final, this time coming out 3-1 victors over York City in front of over 35,000 Oxford fans who had made the trip to London.
And they could finish it off here. It's 2 against 1. He's got Deering to his right. He's got to feed Potter again. Potter to wrap it up. Oxford United are back in the Football League.
Deering in support. Out of play, far side of the field. And the referee brings the agony to an end. It's redemption for Oxford United. Back on the coupon. Back in the Football League. Back where they belong.
In 2014, it was all changed for the club again, with Darrell Eales coming in as chairman, Mark Ashton as CEO, and the appointment of Michael Appleton as head coach. It didn't take long for Appleton to put his mark on the side, with just his 2nd season, him taking Oxford United to a Wembley final against Barnsley, where they sadly lost 3-2, but then the month after they secured promotion back from League 2 to League 1 after a 3-0 win over local rivals Wycombe Wanderers.
Stoppage time added here as United break forward with Callum O'Dowda right edge of the penalty area. Barry available to him, but O'Dowda goes forward on his own, gets back up on his feet after a stumble. Callum O'Dowda! The Kidlington kid put Oxford United, his hometown club, into League 1! He's dreamt of a moment like that his whole life! And for the first time in 15 years, Oxford United will play at the 3rd tier of British football. And it's tears at the Kassam Stadium of joy, not agony. Callum O'Dowda makes it Oxford United 3, Wycombe Wanderers 0. Oxford will be promoted to League 1 tonight.
Since then, Oxford become a settled side in League 1 with 2 failed playoff campaigns. But things on and off the pitch are looking better than ever, and they're going from strength to strength as a club. As well as becoming a settled League 1 side, they've had some giant killings along the way, including an FA Cup win against Swansea, who were then in the Premier League, and a win against the Championship side Newcastle, as well as other games against Man City and West Ham in the League Cup recently. With the contract running out at the Kassam in 2026, it's time to look somewhere else for Oxford United, and the proposed site is here at Stratfield Brake, currently home of Gosford All Blacks Rugby Club, Kidlington Cricket Club and Kidlington Youth Football Club. With the proposed move looking to go ahead in 2026, hopefully the good times can come rolling back to Oxford United, and the new ground will be something like the Manor was, and the dark days of the Kassam can be put behind them.
Each one of our own. Shall we beat them on the way? Shall we beat them? Shall we beat them on the wing? Shall we beat them on the wing? On the wing.